Well, hello there, crafty friends. It's Vicki from StampSmiles.com, and I'm tripling my task today because I'm participating in the Power of Practice blog hop, where we share an older photo from a project we've done and how we progress through practicing over time, as well as the Crafty Chefs group with the September recipe from our head chef Linda, as well as making this birthday card for my son. And I'm using these really cool products from Tailored Expressions, this big grumpy stamp set with that little grumpy bear in there, which is adorable and perfect for my son's birthday card because during his school years he was nicknamed Bear. And then of course I'm using the big grumpy birthday set and coordinating dies, as well as this plaid 6x6 layering stencil from Tailored Expressions. Now for my card, I have taken an older photo from 2007, and what caught my eye was the layout of the square card and the blue and the brown colors. And I'm using that as a base because I was thinking of the Crafty Chef's recipe doing this, so I've kind of just taken that card and cased it so that you can see a card that I did back from 2007 and how I'm going to, basically upgrade and show you what I have done over the years since 2007. Hopefully it's something better than what I did in 2007, which I think it is, and I'll explain why as we go along. But first, I'm starting out with the plaid stencil over the craft cardstock using some distress inks, and that was tea stain that I started out with the first layer of stencil. Now I've picked up the other layer of stencil, and if this would be a lot easier if I had like a piece of scratch paper, and those squares on the corner that you see on the stencil is supposed to help you line up the plaid so it's even. But honestly, I really didn't care because I just wanted the pattern of it to go along the edges of it. Because if you saw my card, then you will see that I'm just taking a piece of the blue cardstock and it's just going to go right over top. And by the way, that darker color of Distress ink was Vintage Photo. And I'm using the Tailored Expression blending brush, and I'm just kind of darkening up with the Vintage Photo around the edges of that panel as well. And now I'm just inking up all the stamps I'm using on my card with some Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink, which is Copic friendly, using my Misty to stamp all of them at once over some Copic blending card. And that is with some of the words that are used in the Big Grumpy Birthday stamp set. It was not really that hard to line up, even though it's not clear. I just set it inside there where I thought it should go, picked it up with my Misty and stamped it out. Now I'm going to show you, I'm really speeding up my Copic coloring here, and I'm going to show you, this is one of the things that I'm going to talk about as I go along here. But in regards to the Power of Practice blog hop, this is something that I can say took a really long time for me to perfect as I go, and I'm still learning as I go. But I'm going to talk a little bit back and forth. I've basically flooded the bear image with some E30 with my Copic marker. And this is not something that I always do. And actually more recently I've started doing it because I've learned it makes the blending of the colors a little bit better if you layer the first layer down first. And I have a bunch of pinks there. I have some R11 and R00 and R000 for his belly, and then I use in his ears, and then I use some R20 for his cheeks, which I will blend out when I use the brown colors. And now I've gone in with a darker of the E30 family. So I flooded it with the E30, and now I'm going in with some E37, and I'm starting to make the darker shadows of where the bear would be. It makes him more dimensional. And this is something I wanted to talk about too, is that I did not start out using Copic markers when I started paper crafting. As you can see in the photo from 2007 is when that photo was taken. I was blogging, but I don't believe that I knew anything about Copic markers at the time. The way I colored was on that particular card there was I believe I was using inks, like ink pads, and then like a blender pen. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but back then that was a very popular way of doing it, especially as a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator. That was ways that we would color in. And once I moved away from Stampin' Up! And I started doing, I discovered these Copic markers and I started coloring. It was just a whole new world for me. And I really enjoyed it. And this is not something for everyone. Everybody's different. Everyone goes at their own pace. Everyone does something they enjoy better one than another. But this is something that I just love doing. I love spending my time doing. It makes time go by really fast. I just put on some music. As a matter of fact, when I was coloring, I had music on and I was probably singing while I was doing this, while the camera was on. And that's something that I think is very important as far as practicing goes. If you enjoy doing it, then you're going to improve naturally without you even realizing it, because it's something that you enjoy. And as a matter of fact, the whole time that I do this and I color or put together a card, I am literally thinking about the person. Like the person I'm making this card for is my son, and it's for his birthday. And the fact that I'm using a bear image, which replicates his nickname and everything like that, just, everything I do kind of comes from the heart. And I think that's very important when you're doing your craft and you're doing something you love, you're doing something you enjoy. And the more that you do it and the more you enjoy doing it, the more you're going to learn from it and the better you're going to get at it, because you enjoy it. And if you enjoy it, then obviously the more you're going to want to do it, the more you will do it. So this is something that I can tell you that over time takes a lot of time. And of course it takes a lot of money. I did not buy like 500 Copic markers all at the same time. It took me a long time to get to the point that I'm at now. So that's kind of my point with the Copic coloring and everything. A lot of people are very critical of themselves when they put together a card or they color or something like that. I am still critical of myself too. I don't claim to be any kind of expert. I learned this on my own. And I have taken classes over time, but when I first started, I had very little markers and very little time because I have young children, and also I didn't have all the skills that all these other people did in the classes. I pretty much learned on my own because it was something that I really wanted to do and it was something that I enjoyed. So if you keep that in mind, you will definitely get better as you go. And watching videos, I think, is a great way to learn, especially if it's someone that you admire or someone that you really like what they do. You're going to definitely learn from what they do. So after coloring up my bear, I always like to add details to things that I color. And this is just basically a personal preference for me. I like those fun little details that you add to it. I'm a very detail-oriented type person. So if you see me coloring, then this is something that I do. This is a white gel pen, and I added dots to his cheeks and dots to the party hat, as well as the little birthday present on there. And now I'm taking a Spectrum Noir glitter brush pen, and I made a little glob on the corner over there to get some of the, because you have to squeeze it to get it out. And then I'm just going over the balloon with that, as well as the little strings on the present. And now I'm just using the dies to cut it out. And here's a lesson to learn, is that don't put the sparkle over the balloon before you die cut it out, because it crinkles it. It was still wet. The little me is part of the joke on there, and I die cut that out with a speech bubble, and that's part of it. And then I inked up the edges of it with some distress ink. And now I'm just I used that little brown piece and used an embossing folder because that's part of the Crafty Chef's recipe that I embossed. So I embossed that panel, went over it with white ink, as well as these blue panels. I decided to take some of the white ink and go around the edges of that as well, because that's something I like to do too, is distress edges of panels and things like that. And as you go along and you put together cards, you start picking up on these little details and you start realizing what you like and what you don't like, and just a matter of preferences. So now I'm just basically assembling the card together. And basically what that blue piece of strip is I just cut it off from making the square card base, which the finished square card base is 5 inches square. And now I'm just cutting off this piece, and then of course I don't like to throw anything away, so I will probably save that and put it in my scrap bin and use it for later. Now, here's something else, is when I'm assembling this card and going along, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to attach the plaid panel that I used over the craft, and I attached that to another piece of like chocolate brown panel. And I went to put because I used the foam tape on the blue panel. But then here I realized that the border strip of grass that I die cut out, I needed to cut the edges off of it. And so I had to lift up the foam tape so that I would be able to cut it. So I didn't want to stick it down and then risk ripping the paper and tearing it apart. So sometimes when you go along and you're putting a card together, you kind of forget what your layout is, doing things. So I do a lot of rearranging and things like that, but that's another thing. Just merely putting together a card, you start learning and practicing, and you learn things as you go. So now I'm just gluing the party hat on the bear, as well as attaching the balloon from behind him. I used a little bit of liquid glue for that. And then on the back of it, I just went ahead and added some foam tape to the back of it. But I learned my lesson from the first time, and I'm not going to take the backing off the tape just yet. So, and see, I had the scissors underneath it. So I do not know why I removed the scissors, because it kind of stuck down. But thankfully, I was able to get it off and cut the edges off. And now, finally I can put the grass down and put the layer down over top. And see, I don't have the backing off the bear yet. So now I can rearrange my scene. This is something that I like to do. I like to rearrange the scene a little bit before attaching everything down. I think I'm good to go on that one. So I'm using my liquid glue and attaching the present on the back of the blue panel and tucking it behind the grass border that I die cut out. And that's something on my old card that I did back in 2007, if you look at the photo, and you can see still shots on my blog too. But I think I just used like a pair of scissors, because there was no grass border die cuts, I believe, at the time, or at least I didn't own one. So I just literally took scissors and just made snips in it. And that's how I made that border there. So as you can see, tools progress over time as well. And now I've just taken the backing off of the foam tape now and placing him over top of the card. And then as a final touch, I've used a C1 marker, Copic marker, just to get a little bit of shading over him. And as you do cards, you will pick up on these little details as well. But that's it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed my birthday card I made for my son, and I hope you will join us on the blog hop today. So thanks so much for stopping by, friends.